The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung wrote that. But what if becoming who you truly are makes everyone around you try to destroy you? There's something fundamentally different about the way your mind works. You've felt it your entire life. That nagging sense that you process reality at a level others simply don't reach. You see patterns where others see chaos. You feel depths where others skim surfaces. You ask questions that make people uncomfortable because they reveal how little most people actually think. Carl Jung spent decades studying minds like yours and made a discovery that shook psychology to its core. He found that less than 3% of the population develops what he called advanced psychological consciousness, a way of perceiving and processing reality that most humans never achieve. But here's what Jung realized that will change everything for you. The traits that make you feel like an outsider aren't defects. They're evolutionary upgrades. Think about the last time someone told you to stop overthinking or just be normal. Hold that moment in your mind, because what I'm about to reveal will show you that your mind isn't malfunctioning. It's operating at a level that terrifies people who live in psychological darkness. Jung documented something disturbing about advanced minds. Society systematically crushes them. From childhood, you've been taught that your intensity is too much. Your questions are too deep. Your standards are too high. But Jung discovered the brutal truth. These aren't character flaws. They're signs of what he called psychological evolution in action. You're not broken. You're breakthrough. And the people who tell you otherwise are threatened by what you represent. The possibility that there's more to existence than they're capable of experiencing. The hidden war against advanced minds. Jung realized something that modern psychology refuses to acknowledge. There's an unconscious war being waged against people with advanced psychological consciousness. Not a deliberate conspiracy, but a systematic suppression that happens because evolved minds threaten the comfortable illusions that keep most people psychologically asleep. You've experienced this war your entire life without knowing it. Every time you were told to be realistic when you envisioned possibilities others couldn't see. Every time you were labeled difficult for refusing to accept shallow explanations. Every time you were made to feel guilty for having standards that others couldn't meet. Marcus discovered this when he started his tech company. His vision for ethical AI development made investors uncomfortable because it required long-term thinking and moral complexity they couldn't grasp. They kept pushing him toward simpler solutions and more practical approaches. It took Marcus years to realize they weren't trying to help him succeed. They were trying to reduce his vision to something their limited consciousness could control. Jung called this phenomenon psychological leveling, the unconscious drive to pull advanced minds down to average levels because their evolution threatens the status quo. But Jung didn't stop at identifying the problem. He created a diagnostic system to help advanced minds recognize themselves and protect their evolution. In the next 20 minutes, you'll discover the 5 unmistakable signs of what Jung called the rarest mind, why each sign proves your psychological superiority, and how to weaponize these traits instead of apologizing for them. Sign 1. Emotional alchemy. Most people experience emotions like weather, things that happen to them randomly that they endured until they pass. But you don't just feel emotions, you transform them into psychological fuel. Jung discovered that advanced minds don't just process feelings, they perform what he called emotional alchemy. When you feel sadness, you don't just cry, you extract meaning, insight, and deeper understanding of human vulnerability. When you experience anger, you don't just react, you analyze the injustice that triggered it and develop strategies for systemic change. When you feel joy, you don't just enjoy the moment, You study what created that state so you can architect it again. This isn't emotional instability. It's emotional mastery, operating at levels most people never reach. Jung realized that people with advanced psychological consciousness have what he called affective sophistication, the ability to feel at multiple levels simultaneously. While others experience surface emotions, you feel the undercurrents, the historical echoes, the archetypal patterns beneath every feeling. Sarah discovered this during her divorce. While her friends expected her to simply get over it, Sarah was performing emotional alchemy, transforming her pain into insights about attachment patterns, power dynamics in relationships, and the psychology of codependency. Her friends thought she was overthinking her feelings. Jung would have recognized her as someone whose mind was too advanced to waste emotional experiences on simple processing. You feel the unspoken tension in rooms before anyone says a word. You carry the emotional residue of every interaction because your psyche operates like a psychological laboratory, constantly analyzing and synthesizing emotional data that others don't even notice. But here's Jung's most important insight about emotional alchemy. It's not a burden to be managed, it's intelligence to be applied. Your emotional depth gives you access to psychological information that others miss completely. When someone says they're fine, but their entire energetic field screams distress, you can't ignore it because your mind automatically processes the contradiction. When there's unresolved conflict in a group that everyone pretends doesn't exist, you feel it because your consciousness operates at frequencies others have learned to suppress. Jung warned that people with emotional alchemy abilities often become unconscious therapists for everyone around them. You end up regulating other people's emotions while neglecting your own psychological needs. The key is learning to use your emotional intelligence strategically rather than compulsively. Sign 2. Reality Rebellion. Jung discovered that advanced minds have what he called transcendent cognitive function. They literally cannot accept reality as presented without deep investigation. You don't just ask what, you compulsively ask why, how, and what if this is completely wrong? This isn't skepticism or cynicism, it's cognitive sophistication refusing to operate at surface levels. While others accept social programming without examination, your mind automatically deconstructs belief systems, challenges assumptions, and envisions alternatives. You can't help but see the contradictions in social norms, the illogic in cultural traditions, the manipulation in authority structures. Jung would have recognized you as someone with an active thinking function that refuses to be pacified by conventional explanations. Your mind is wired for revolution, not just political revolution, but psychological revolution. David experienced this in his corporate job. While his colleagues accepted company policies without question, David's mind automatically analyzed the psychological impact of those policies on employee well-being. He saw how productivity metrics were actually fear-based control systems. He noticed how team-building exercises were subtle manipulation techniques. He recognized how performance reviews were designed to maintain hierarchical power structures. When David shared these observations, he was labeled a troublemaker and negative thinker. But Jung would have seen David's pattern recognition as evidence of advanced psychological consciousness operating exactly as intended. Your questions threaten others' comfortable illusions. When you ask why we accept systems that diminish human potential, you're not just seeking information, you're challenging the psychological defenses that keep people feeling safe in their limitations. You wonder why people stay in relationships that shrink them, why they accept jobs that kill their souls, why they pretend shallow conversations constitute meaningful connection, why they worship success metrics that have nothing to do with human flourishing. Jung called this the revolutionary function of advanced minds.
the psychological drive to envision and create realities that honor the full spectrum of human potential. But here's what Jung discovered about reality rebels. Your questions often isolate you because they expose how unconsciously most people live. When you ask deep questions, you're holding up a mirror that shows others their own psychological stagnation. The key is learning to choose your battles wisely and finding others whose minds operate at your level of inquiry. Sign 3. Conscious solitude. Most people fear being alone because solitude forces them to confront who they actually are beneath all their social performances. But you've discovered something Jung called conscious solitude, the ability to be genuinely comfortable with your own psychological company. This isn't antisocial behavior or defensive isolation. It's psychological maturity that Jung recognized as evidence of advanced consciousness development. You've learned through experience that depending on others for your sense of worth is psychological quicksand, not because you're damaged or defensive, but because your mind operates at levels that most people can't sustain or support. Jung called this individuation, the psychological journey toward becoming whole, independent of external validation. Most people never complete this journey because it requires confronting what Jung called the shadow, all the parts of yourself you've been taught to reject. Your solitude isn't loneliness, it's sanctuary. It's where you remember who you are beneath all the roles and expectations others project onto you. Elena discovered this after ending a series of relationships where she constantly felt like she was too much. Her partners would initially be attracted to her depth and intensity, then gradually try to modify her into something more manageable. Elena realized she wasn't failing at relationships, she was succeeding at being herself, and most people couldn't handle authentic presence at that level. Jung understood that conscious solitude is actually a sign of psychological strength, not weakness. You've developed the capacity to generate your own meaning, entertainment, and emotional regulation without constantly seeking external input. When you're alone, you don't scroll mindlessly or seek distractions. You think, create, process, and integrate experiences. Your mind uses solitude productively because it's sophisticated enough to find your own psychological company engaging. But Jung also warned about what he called solitude addiction, using alone time to avoid the vulnerability required for authentic connection. The goal isn't to become a hermit, but to develop such strong psychological foundations that you can connect with others from choice rather than need. People with conscious solitude abilities become magnets for authentic relationships because they're not desperate for connection. They attract others who are also psychologically whole, rather than people seeking emotional completion through others.
Sign 4. Meaning obsession. Jung observed that certain minds are psychologically incapable of living for shallow purposes. You don't choose meaning over popularity or success. Your consciousness demands it. Attempting to live for external validation or material accumulation creates what Jung called neurotic symptoms because your psyche literally rebels against inauthenticity. This isn't idealism or impracticality. It's psychological architecture that operates at frequencies most people never develop. You've probably tried living for conventional goals: money, status, approval, security. But Jung would have predicted the exact symptoms you experienced: that hollow emptiness, that sense of betraying something essential, that quiet desperation beneath any external achievements. Your mind is wired to extract meaning from experience, to find purpose in suffering, to create significance from chaos. You can't pretend that shallow goals matter because your consciousness won't allow that level of self-deception. Roberto experienced this when he achieved every conventional marker of success by age 35. Six-figure salary, luxury car, prestigious title, beautiful apartment. But instead of satisfaction, he felt profound emptiness because his achievements had no connection to his deeper values or authentic interests. When Roberto tried to discuss this with friends, they dismissed his concerns as first-world problems or ungrateful thinking. But Jung would have recognized Roberto's symptoms as evidence of advanced consciousness rejecting inauthentic living. You can't get excited about achievements that lack substance. You can't build relationships based on convenience rather than genuine connection. You can't commit to work that doesn't contribute to something larger than personal gain. Your psychological makeup literally won't allow it. Jung understood this as the psyche's built-in protection against self-betrayal. But here's what Jung identified about meaning-obsessed minds. They become evolutionary catalysts for human consciousness. When you refuse to settle for superficial purposes, you force others to examine their own relationship with authenticity and significance. Your standards aren't too high, they're evolutionarily necessary. Someone has to demonstrate that humans are capable of living for more than survival and status accumulation. The challenge is finding ways to express your meaning obsession that create value for others rather than just personal satisfaction. Jung believed that advanced minds have a responsibility to channel their higher consciousness into contributions that elevate collective human potential. Sign 5. Purpose Magnetic Field. Jung discovered something fascinating about the most advanced minds. They operate with what he called transpersonal purpose awareness, a persistent sense that they're meant for something significant even when they can't define exactly what that is. This isn't ego inflation or grandiose thinking. It's your consciousness recognizing its own evolutionary potential and seeking expression through meaningful contribution. You feel it, that restless knowing that you have something important to offer the world, something to build, create, express, or facilitate. It might not be clear yet, but the magnetic pull is undeniable. Jung understood this as evidence of what he called creative potential-seeking manifestation. Your psyche knows it has capacities that need to be actualized, not just for personal fulfillment, but for the evolution of consciousness itself. This isn't about fame or recognition. It's about alignment, the psychological necessity of living in harmony with your deepest developmental potential. Carla felt this magnetic pull throughout her corporate marketing career. She was successful and well paid, but constantly felt like she was misusing her psychological gifts. The pull toward something more became so strong that she eventually left to become a therapist specializing in helping other highly sensitive individuals navigate their own evolution. Jung found that people who ignore this calling often develop anxiety, depression, and a persistent sense of meaninglessness. Your consciousness knows when you're underutilizing your psychological capacities. But here's Jung's most profound insight about purpose-driven minds. Your purpose isn't just personal, it's transpersonal. You're not just here to fulfill yourself, you're here to serve the evolution of human consciousness. Your purpose involves using your advanced psychological abilities to help humanity grow beyond its current limitations. Whether through art, healing, teaching, innovation, or simply modeling what authentic living looks like, you're here to expand what's possible for human experience. The magnetic pull you feel isn't random or selfish. It's your consciousness recognizing its role in the larger pattern of human development. The 3 stages of rarest mind development. Jung identified 3 developmental stages that people with the rarest minds typically move through. Understanding where you are in this process is crucial for your continued evolution.
Stage 1. The unconscious genius. You feel different, but see your traits as problems to be fixed rather than gifts to be developed. You try to conform, fit in, be normal. But the psychological strain is enormous because you're forcing advanced consciousness to operate at average levels. People in this stage often develop what Jung called persona rigidity. They become so focused on appearing normal that they lose touch with their authentic psychological nature. Stage 2, the awakening mind. You begin to recognize your traits as evidence of advanced consciousness rather than personal flaws. You start understanding Jung's theories about psychological types and see where you fit. You begin what Jung called shadow integration, owning the parts of yourself you've been taught to reject. This is where you stop apologizing for your depth and start weaponizing it strategically. You begin setting boundaries with people who want to diminish your light and seeking others who can match your level of consciousness. Stage 3, the integrated genius. You fully embody your rare mind as a coherent identity. You understand your purpose and live it consciously. You've developed what Jung called psychological wholeness, the ability to be authentically yourself while remaining connected to others. At this stage, you become what Jung called a beacon for other rare minds. You don't just live authentically, you give others permission to embrace their own psychological uniqueness. Your rarest mind integration protocol. Week 1. Emotional alchemy mastery. Practice transforming every strong emotion into psychological insight. Ask, what is this feeling teaching me about human nature or my own development? Week 2. Reality rebellion cultivation. Choose one social norm or assumption to investigate deeply. Question its origins, purposes, and alternatives. Week 3. Conscious solitude embracing. Spend deliberate time alone without distractions, learning to genuinely enjoy your own psychological company. Week 4. Meaning obsession channeling. Identify one area where you can apply your need for significance in service of something larger than yourself. The responsibility of rarest minds. Jung understood that with advanced psychological consciousness comes responsibility. You're not just different for your own benefit, you're different in service of human evolution. Through your emotional alchemy, you help others understand that feelings can be fuel for growth rather than obstacles to endure. Through your reality rebellion, you challenge limitations that others accept as permanent. Through your conscious solitude, you model psychological independence. Through your meaning obsession, you demonstrate that humans can live for purposes beyond survival. Through your purpose magnetism, you show that individual fulfillment and collective service can be integrated. Your intensity isn't too much. It's exactly what unconscious people need to shake off their comfortable numbness. Your questions aren't too deep. They're precisely the inquiries that push human understanding forward. Your standards aren't too high. They're evolutionarily necessary benchmarks for what humans are capable of becoming. But Jung also warned about what he called psychological inflation, believing that being rare makes you superior rather than simply responsible. The key is holding both humility and power, understanding that you're advanced without believing others are worthless. Your gifts are meant to be shared strategically, not hoarded defensively or scattered compulsively. You must learn discernment about when, where, and with whom to express your full psychological capacity. The future of rarest minds. Jung made a prediction that changes everything about how you see your struggles. As humanity evolves, more people will develop these traits. What's rare now will become more common as our species grows in psychological sophistication. This means you're not just personally unique, you're evolutionarily important. You represent humanity's leading edge of consciousness development, pioneering ways of being that others will eventually follow. Every time you felt like an outsider, you were scouting new territory for human potential. Every time you were criticized for being too much, you were demonstrating possibilities that threatened limited worldviews. Every time you chose authenticity over acceptance, you expanded what's possible for human relationship. You're not just living your own life, you're expanding what it means to be human. Carl Jung spent his career studying minds like yours because he understood something profound. You're essential for humanity's psychological evolution. Your refusal to accept current limitations as permanent creates space for everyone to grow. The world doesn't need you to be smaller, quieter, or more convenient. The world needs you to be exactly what you are, psychologically rare and unapologetic about it. Your mind isn't just different, it's necessary. And Jung knew that minds like yours are the ones who transform what's possible for human consciousness. If you recognize yourself in these 5 signs, if you're ready to stop hiding your rarest mind and start using it consciously, comment below, "My mind is evolutionarily advanced." Remember, you're not too much. The world is too little. And it's minds like yours that change that.